post 1947 global world order emerged from a crass imperialism, visibilized coloniality and imperialism, to a very subtle sort of individualism, garbed imperialism, where institutions of impact and sovereign dilution were created, like IMF, like World Bank, which would appear to be in line with the expansion, growth, and development of all nations alike. But the way they were structured, it had a gravity towards certain powers of influence, especially the United States. It included United Nations, NATO, so in a way, military, diplomacy, economy, finances, all of it. And in all of that, what is happening is decolonization of world, in a sense that a certain sense of sovereignty is being given or is being taken by people who are part of certain geographies, and more than 200 nation states emerge from a colonial setting. And now everybody has a constitution, but nothing in economics, in a sense, is an isolated, closed economy. All of this is integrated through global chains of interaction and capitalism. And in this context, what is assumed, like a Westphalian order, where every nation is sovereign enough that nobody else can, without international consensus, enter into other people's sovereign domain as a oppressive or as a military force. So one of the questions that comes to me is from your perspective, because you've written on it. Where is in the history leading to Venezuela, there has been so many episodes where already all of this has been compromised and was compromising, and still Venezuela emerges as a special case, like a convergence of all of those failures of the world order, and which is becoming hyper visible. You don't need enough narrative building to do certain kinds of actions that at some point of time was expected, that there's a global war on terror. There's, now you need very little evidence, and where very little evidence and narrative making to invade Gaza, to to have geopolitics in Sudan, to do something like this in Venezuela. Please expand on what happened in the last 7 decades of the new world order, and how Venezuela is symptomatic of maybe the way it is ending.
Yeah, firstly, you've asked a very good question, but the question itself maybe needs to be moved around a little bit, because, in 1945, World War II ends. 50 million Soviet citizens and Chinese nationals died. 25 odd Chinese nationals, 25 million, 26 million Soviet citizens. I mean, they paid the price for fighting fascism. United States lost 500,000 people. The world order emerges with the world in ruins, except for the United States. It was largely unscathed by the war. It had enormous industrial power. It wanted to use that through the new Bretton Woods institutions, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, to shape the world order. But let's also remember that the UN Charter comes into effect 1945. This part of the world, Asia, Africa and so on, was struggling to come out of colonialism. So what did the Allies do? France returns to Indochina and Algeria to reassert its colonial right. In other words, to bring a new post-war fascism into the lives of the Vietnamese and the Algerians. The British tried to reassert their colonial right in Malaysia, in Kenya, in various parts of Africa, and of course in South Asia. It's not that 1945 happened and the British left. Wait a minute. from 1945, 46, 40, there were sustained struggles. 1946 was a year of strikes in India. The working class was struggling. The British wanted to hold on to their colonies. They were not keen on walking away. I'm going to come back in a second to the main colony. And the Dutch, who had been liberated, from fascism, go back to Indonesia and fight a dirty war against the Indonesian people to hold on to that vast country, which then wins its independence in 1948. So there was no liberal order. There was none. There was no liberal order. It has never existed. In 1948, the United Nations drafted and had a treaty signed called the Convention Against Genocide. Very important treaty. That same year, the Israelis decide to violate the partition plan and conduct the Nakba against the Palestinians, the catastrophe of the Palestinians. That same year, there was no liberal order. It has never existed. I mean, I'm not saying this rhetorically. I actually mean this, that it's never existed. The colonial order became the neo-colonial order, which is what Kwame Nkrumah called it. And it's interesting that in the last period, since the fall of the Soviet Union, you have seen that kind of naked aggression pick up from the collective West. Whether it's the attack on and destruction of Iraq, the attack on Afghanistan, the destruction of Libya and Syria, and then of course from the Oslo Accords onward, the betrayals that the Palestinians have faced, and then the great destruction. This has shaped the world we live in today. This sort of mad, naked display of power. The one thing that our institute did in 2024 is we published a text called Hyper-Imperialism, in which we argued that the Western countries are beginning to lose their control over economics. They are, in that sense, losing control over raw materials, over science and technology, to some extent because the US has sanctioned so much of the world, also losing control of finance. The one area where the collective West remains extraordinarily powerful is the military. The United States doesn't spend over $1 trillion a year on the military not to create something quite special. And they put that to display in Venezuela on the 3rd of January when they had 150 aircraft above the sky and pummeled the city. But nothing to compare to what the United States and Israelis did to Gaza, to Lebanon. I mean, I was recently in Lebanon, what they've done to southern Lebanon, how they killed Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad airport, how they killed Syed Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut. The kidnapping of Nicolás Maduro has to be seen along the lines of what was done to Soleimani, what was done to Nasrallah. This is, in a sense, of the same caliber. So Venezuela is actually part of a long history of neocolonialism. And in a way, there's another narrative which you can thread into this, which is what was done to Iran in 1953, where democratically elected President Mossadegh was overthrown
Yes.
because he wanted to take control of the oil. And in that sense, there's this other narrative, the oil narrative from Mossadegh to Maduro, which also makes captivating sense.